What if the secrets of modern medicine weren't a tea born in shiny labs, but in dusty temples along the Nile? What if the people we imagine worshipping cats and building pyramids were also the ones stitching wounds, setting bones, and writing the first medical textbooks? Tonight we are going to answer a question you'll be probably never asked out loud, but definitely want to know. Did Egyptian medicine actually work? Or was it just elaborate ritual dressed up as science? Before we dig in, quick favor. If you love uncovering the truth behind myths, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this digital Nile stretches. All right, let's step back 3,500 years. Imagine walking into an Egyptian temple at dawn. Sunlight filters through massive stone columns. Incense burns, mixing with the smell of herbs. A man in a white linen robe sits before you. He's not just a priest. He's what the Egyptians called a swandaw, a physician. And unlike many ancient healers, this one actually had textbooks. Yes, textbooks. One of the wildest discoveries in Egyptology is a set of medical papyri, long scrolls filled with recipes, observations, and treatments. The most famous, the Ebers Papyrus, runs over 100 pages long. Think of it as the Gray's Anatomy of 1550 BCE. It covers everything from toothaches to tumors. The catch? Not all of it makes sense. One line might suggest honey as an antibacterial salve, which is scientifically valid, and the next prescribes crocodile dung as contraception, which, let's just say, did not make it into modern practice. So, did it work? Let's go myth versus evidence. Myth: Egyptian medicine was mostly magic and prayers. Evidence: not entirely true. Yes, religion played a huge role. Diseases were often blamed on angry gods or evil spirits. Spells and incantations were written right into medical papyri. But next to those spells, you'll find surprisingly practical instructions. Broken bones were splinted with wooden sticks and linen. Wounds were stitched with needle and thread. There's even evidence they performed rudimentary surgeries, draining abscesses or removing cysts. These weren't just random experiments. They had a system. And some of it worked shockingly well. Honey, for example, was prescribed for wounds, and modern science has confirmed it has antibacterial properties. Willow bark, used for pain, contains salicin, which is basically the ancient ancestor of aspirin. Flaxseed poultices, garlic for infections, castor oil as a laxative. Egyptian remedies read like the world's first natural pharmacy. But let's not romanticize everything. Some cures were straight up dangerous. For instance, powdered lead was applied to the eyes to treat irritation. Oops! Mercury and animal dung also made appearances in their medicine cabinet. Imagine walking into a clinic today and being told, "Here, rub this fresh donkey dung on your wound." Not exactly what you'd call best practice. And here's where things get fascinating. Egyptians didn't separate medicine from religion. A doctor could recite a spell, apply honey, and say both were necessary. For them, healing the body and soul were intertwined. To us, that sounds unscientific. But here is the twist. Modern studies suggest placebos and belief can actually help the healing process. So maybe their mix of magic and medicine wasn't so irrational after all. Let's zoom out. How do we know this wasn't just random scribbling? Archaeology provides the receipts. Skeletons from ancient Egypt show evidence of healed fractures, meaning bone-setting techniques worked. Dental remains show attempts at drilling and filling teeth. Mummies have surgical scars. One even had a prosthetic wooden toe fitted so perfectly it could still function. That's not myth. That's engineering. Here's an obscure detail most people miss. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, another famous medical text, is basically a trauma manual. It lists injuries from head to toe, describes symptoms, and even gives prognoses. A wound you can treat, a wound you cannot treat. This isn't magical thinking. It's cold, clinical triage, and it's over 3,000 years old. Some scholars argue this is the earliest evidence of rational, systematic medicine anywhere in the world. Still, scholars debate whether the average Egyptian actually benefited from all this knowledge. Was advanced care reserved only for elites? Did common farmers ever see these treatments? Or was it mostly priests patching up nobles and soldiers? The jury's still out. But what we can say is that the knowledge existed, and much of it was practical. Let's not forget the role of women. In Egyptian society, women weren't excluded from medicine. Records mention female physicians, especially in gynecology and childbirth. In fact, some of the oldest fertility tests come from Egypt, involving barley seeds and urine. Believe it or not, those tests worked about 70% of the time. Modern science has confirmed hormones in urine can affect seed growth. Wild, right? But here's the kicker. Egyptian medicine didn't just stay in Egypt. It spread. Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen studied Egyptian practices. Knowledge flowed along with trade and conquest. What started in Nile temples eventually shaped the foundation of Western medicine. In a way, every aspirin tablet you take carries a faint echo of a willow bark prescription written 3,500 years ago. So, what's the verdict? Did Egyptian medicine actually work? The answer is both yes and no. Yes, because they discovered remedies, like honey, willow bark and splints, that are still used today. No, because they also recommended treatments that were toxic, bizarre, or purely ritual. The truth is that Egyptian medicine was a blend of genius and guesswork. It was the first big step in a very long journey toward modern healthcare. Here's the big takeaway. Myths about ancient medicine make it sound like superstition. The evidence proves it was the start of science. It shows us that even in a world of gods and pharaohs, people were already experimenting, observing, and trying to solve the same problems we still face: pain, injury, disease. And maybe that's why this story matters. Because it reminds us that progress doesn't come from clean breakthroughs. It comes from centuries of messy trial and error. The Egyptians didn't get everything right, but without their experiments we might not have gotten as far as we have. So next time you pop an aspirin, stitch a cut, or even wear a prosthetic, remember, you're holding a thread that stretches all the way back to a temple by the Nile, where a physician once wrote a spell, smeared honey on a wound, and unknowingly helped build the foundation of modern medicine. If you enjoyed this dive into myth versus evidence, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below. Would you trust an Egyptian doctor if you lived back then? Or would you run for the hills if they handed you a jar of crocodile dung? Either way, the past proves one thing. Medicine has always been a mix of brilliance, mistakes, and a little bit of faith, and the Egyptians were the first to write it all down.